Hello, my name is Sheila Kinnard, and I am a retired drama teacher here in Wichita, Kansas. I taught at Mayberry Cultural Fine Arts Middle Magnet School for 17 years. And being a teacher and a performer and a reader, I knew the importance of reading. And most of the lessons that I taught were literature-based. And being in drama, I also wanted to expose my students to quality performances and acting. My number one favorite unit was based on A Raisin in the Sun. The reason I picked Lorraine Hansberry's Raisin in the Sun is because it starts with a poem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? And so I get some elements of poetry and culture, arts, history, all woven into a lesson that deals with A Raisin in the Sun. There are several good movies with A Raisin in the Sun, and I use clips from the movies, and I also dig into the characters in the story. The Sidney Poitiers, the Felicia Rashad when she did it, and other performers that actually were in A Raisin in the Sun. And as you know, A Raisin in the Sun was based on a true story by Lorraine Hansberry. Her father was a real estate agent and was unable to buy a house that he could afford, but because of his race, he was denied. And Lorraine knew about this, and it ended up being her Raisin in the Sun. What happens to a dream deferred? We do a lot of vocabulary and finding out what these words mean, like deferred doesn't mean denied, it means delayed. In other words, this dream was delayed. And I had a whole unit around A Raisin in the Sun. Some of the aspects that I like to touch on when I'm teaching a lesson, there are certain things that's called elements of culture. And these elements of culture are the food, the folklore, the history, the personalities in the story, the ceremonies, the courtships, the marriages, the relationships. All of these things come into play when you're teaching a unit. And A Raisin in the Sun is one of the best instruments of literature for such a lesson or such a unit. Another fun unit is Jacob Lawrence Aesop Fables. Everybody knows Aesop Fables. Aesop Fables are just cute little stories about animals. And I would have my students to act them out. For example, I would take the ant and the grasshopper. Okay, the ant and the grasshopper. The story of the ant and the grasshopper is there. So I would have one student be an ant and the other student be the grasshopper. And they would read the story. And at the end, there's always a moral to the story. The moral is prepare for the days of necessity. So we would talk about what that is. And then we would move on to the next Aesop fable. And I like this book particularly because it has the author of Jacob Lawrence, who was a fabulous African-American, one of the first artists. He was a painter. He had a solo exhibit at the Museum of Modern Art, et cetera, et cetera. So what I try to do is have a unit that touches multiple levels of learning and experience and culture and bring that into the classroom. Another one of my favorite lessons dealt with the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. Now, when I first saw the movie, it had Cecily Tyson, and everybody has seen the picture where she bends down and she's a little old woman and she's barely able to drink this water out of this drinking fountain. Well, there's a lesson in that, because why was she at that age finally able to drink out of the water fountain? Well, it was because they had water fountains back in those days. If you were colored, or as they called it in those days, they had two different water fountains. So the whole story around that is a beautiful story of culture, of history, of drama, and all of these instruments that I used can be acted out on the stage. They can also be used in language arts class or an English class. So I was not familiar with Ernest Gaines, but apparently the post office was, because they made a postage stamp with his picture on it. He too was another one of those classic novelists, and he wrote about the autobiography. He's the one that wrote the autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman, and then they made it into a movie. Now, there's a book that's on the so-called ban list. I'm not going to get started on that because that's another whole subject. But one of my favorite books out of literature to teach from is To Kill a Mockingbird. All of these books, if you go online, teachers, or anyone who's helping kids, if you go online, you can find study guides for these documents. And the study guides have background and information that you can use if you're unfamiliar to get you up to speed so that when you hit the classroom, you're ready to help these children. To Kill a Mockingbird, I don't know why it's on the banned book list, but it is. And I think several books have been written about Harper Lee and her contribution to literature. One year for our Black History program, I did, that was going back to Raisin in the Sun. I digressed, went back to, but I had the actual class to do a reader's theater at our Black History program. And the students just loved it. So, and if you don't have a reader's theater or a play to go with one of your books, you can always get students to write their own one-act plays or short skits to go with their unit. I found this book called Why to Kill a Mockingbird Matters. And it matters because some of the issues that we were dealing with when these books were written, Harper Lee wrote these books, are still issues that we're dealing with today. This book deals with the importance of racism, not importance, but the idea that we are still grappling with these issues. And kids are dealing with them. So you need to talk about these things in your classroom. Lee, of course, is after more than just one monster here. These are monsters in our life. You might call them monsters. The biggest one is racism. If white Southern society required the maintenance of tissue that lies in the foundation of racial segregation, it did. And Lee's most telling indictment of the society lies in her deliberate decision to seal Tom Robinson's fate as soon as he states that he feels sorry for Mayella Ewell. So the whole story deals around this black man who was just helping out the Ewells, and then he eventually gets accused of a crime that he did not commit. But then later on, as the story goes, so the children get drawn into the story, and they want to act. They can act it out, and they can also write essays about it, or they can do historical characterizations of these individuals, and it makes for a very active and a very engaging classroom. So that's To Kill a Mockingbird. There's another one that I use. Oh, let me go back to Wichita real quick. Wichita was the first nonviolent sit-in, student-led sit-in, the Dockham sit-in. It was overlooked for many, many years, but now we have the authority and we have the recognition that the Dockham sit-in was actually due. And another great lesson that we did for one of our Black History programs, and I use students of color and students that were not of color to be in this, to have a lunch setting, a large table on the stage. There were some students, some white students that stood behind, and they had on their aprons like they were waiting on the lunchroom. And they actually acted out the fact that when these students came in that to be served, can we have a Coke? And I told them, I said, you got to be mean. You got to be mean. Get out of here. And because that's what happened at the Real Doc Obsidian. All I'm saying is all of these things that have happened in our culture, our history, in literature, are excellent examples for building literature, building experiences in theater, in acting, and improvisation. The last one that I became familiar with was The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. It was made into a movie when our friend Oprah found this book and discovered it. They made it into a movie, which is very good. And as I said, I use clips from it. Sometimes I'll show, like on Fridays, I would show the movie, and then the following week we would dig into the different elements of the book. And this has another study guide that I purchased, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. If you don't know who she is, well, shame on you. But if you don't know, I'll tell you in a nutshell. Her cells were used to, without her knowledge, to develop vaccines and medicines that were used to cure a multiplicity of different ailments and diseases. Her family did not see one dime of that money, and they're still working to get some kind of response from these labs that used her blood. But they developed her cells, and they went all over the world, all over the country, and they were called HeLa. They didn't call them Henrietta Lacks cells. They called them HeLa cells, H-E. They just shortened it to that. So after the kids would go through the whole story, and then we would talk about it. And so this even gets into science. So actually literature, if you teach from a literature base, it's just unlimited what you can do with literature. You can, whatever holidays are coming up, the kids can act out things, they can dress up, they can go to the library and check out things. Most of the time they just want to go to Google or Wikipedia and look up something. They can do one of my units, and I'm about to the end of what I want to share with you today. I would have them do artist essays because they need to know how to write. And writing an essay, I would do a whole class or two on what essay, the components of a good essay. And they would have to pick an artist, whether it's living or dead, a visual artist, a performing artist, and they would have to, or a musical artist. I would let them pick a musical artist as well. But if they pick one of those rappers that I don't know, that I couldn't pronounce their name, and their words were a little questionable. You know what I mean? Questionable words, some of the little words. So, but I made sure that they picked an artist that was school appropriate. I'll just put it that way. And then they would have to actually dress up like that person. I had several people pick folks like Frida Kahlo, or a couple of kids wanted to do historical characters like Rosa Parks. And so all of this is to say that your classroom needs to be vibrant. It needs to have, and you need to be vibrant. You need to bring the spirit of excitement into your classroom for whatever you're teaching, whether you're teaching Aesop's Fables or Raisin in the Sun, or just doing a musical or play. Those 17 years that I was at Mayberry, every year we did at least 2 main stage plays in the auditorium. We did a straight play and we did a musical. There are a lot of musicals out there you can get, like Lion King and Annie. And we even took West Side Story And I had my lady in my office, she's a playwright. She would adapt the whole script of West Side Story for middle school kids. So, and even if you're kids, your casting has to be, what's the word I want? You have to have diversity in your casting because you have diversity in your school. And so, you may not have all Puerto Rican kids because there's not that many Puerto Rican kids in your classroom, but you can get those kids to know how to do the music and put the costumes on, and the parents love it, the kids love it, and they're learning while they're doing it. They're learning about their history, they're learning about culture, they're learning about America, they're learning about themselves. So, I have appreciated this time that I've been able to talk to you today. And as a Black educator, I know the importance of teaching, and I want you to be inspired, maybe by some of the books that I've used. You probably have your own, in your own library of books that you can use, or literature that you can springboard off into a lesson. Don't be afraid of it, because the kids will take as much as you give them. If you, this was one of the worksheets, and I said I was going to finish, but I really am going to finish now. This is one of the worksheets that I gave the kids when we studied Langston Hughes. And see, that goes off into the Harlem Renaissance. And so the octopus arms just go everywhere when you start adding on pieces to your tool belt. But this was on the back of one of my students' papers, and as I was going through to figure out what I was going to say to you today, I talked about universal themes. Of course, you can do Shakespeare and you can do the more classic kinds of literature. But let me just read to you all the universal themes when they finally got it. They finally got it. And when I read these, I thought, this child got exactly what I was trying to say. Universal themes in Raisin in the Sun: dreams, power, love, tragedy, discrimination, happiness, comedy, confidence, strength. Can't you see all that? That child is learning all of these characteristics from A Raisin in the Sun. Jealousy, admiration, abuse, success, revenge, action, horror, romance, mystery, suspense, and morality. And when I saw that, I thought, yes, Ms. Kinnard, you taught that lesson. If one child gets it, that's a success. But honey, I had more than one to get it. You better believe, best believe. And all I'm saying is, pick things that excite you. If you're excited about it, then your kids will be excited about it. They may not spell all the words right, but that's okay. They get the idea. And when I looked at her spelling universal, I kind of chuckled, or even raisin. But I marveled at the fact that they were able to retain some of the things that I was trying to pour into them. And to me, that's a success. And that's what we want when we teach. We want to be successful. We want to inspire our children. We want them to know the truth. We want them to speak truth to power. I say all the time that if this is power, then this is truth. And I'm speaking truth right to power. I'm not talking over here. I'm talking right to truth. So many times kids have to learn how to think, how to reason, how to figure out something from a piece of literature. They do this in science, they do this in math, they do this in literature, they do this in drama, they do this in every subject area. They have to learn how to think and apply what they know to make their lives better. I do thank you for listening to me today. I hope you've learned something out of this, and I hope that you are inspired as I have been and as I was for 17 years teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. It was a blast. Sometimes I got they say, don't make Miss Kinnard mad. I would go off on them in a minute because I want them to really listen. I want them to sit down. I want them to pay attention. And I want them to have something when they leave this classroom. I want them to have more information in their little brains than when they came into my room. I wish you luck, God's blessings on you and your teaching and however you work with young people. I know that you'll do great because I can feel it through the waves that you're just going to be great because you have the spirit. Otherwise, you wouldn't have listened to this as long as you did. And hopefully, if you need some of these instruments, they're out there and you probably have some of your own. Thank you very much. Have a great day, and God bless you as you go forward in your teaching.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.